This is Leadership Plus. I'm Dave Edwards. Sometimes I think that nonprofit organizations and the way they are funded and budgeted their money are some of the most misunderstood organizations around. Now, I spent most of my professional career working in nonprofits. And while I managed that organization, I always felt it was important to be very transparent about finances, even with our staff. So at the beginning of our fiscal year, I would share our complete budget with the entire staff. I had nothing to hide. And at the end of the fiscal year, I would also share our annual financial audit report. I'd share that, of course, with our board as well, but always kept our staff informed about our finances. I felt that, they had a stake in this too, and it was important for them to know about the health of the organization. One year, I had one of my managers come up to me, and she was very concerned that when I presented the annual financial audit report, that it showed that the organization had cash left over, a fund balance, if you will. And her thought was that an organization like ours should not have a cash balance at the end of the year because we were nonprofit. And so we should be spending the money that we took in. And it was a little hard to explain to her why that's not a particularly good strategy. But I think she got it later when we hit a recession. I think her original concern was that, I wasn't greenlighting all of the projects that she wanted for her department. And then at the end of the year, we were showing that we had cash left over. But my approach to budgeting, while always very conservative, the idea was that at the end of a fiscal year, we would have money to put into our fund balance. I even had one persistent donor tell me that it was against the law to do what I was doing, that all money had to be put into the current programs of the organization. She was wrong. In a 2011 article, the Chronicle of Philanthropy noted the U.S. Better Business Bureau's Wise Giving Alliance, which assesses whether national organizations are in compliance with its standards for charity and accountability, states that charities should, quote, avoid accumulating funds that could be used for current program activities. Of course, that's a good philosophy, but it's also important to have a little cash on hand when hard times hit. There might be a capital expenditure that suddenly has to be made. Where are you going to suddenly get the money for that if you don't have a fund balance? Or in the case of a recession, what happens then? Because we had cash on hand during the 2009 recession, we were able to keep our current staff. We didn't lay off a single person, and it was because we had the money to keep everybody employed. Now, as I said, I'm pretty conservative fiscally, and so my goal for our organization was to eventually have all of the money in the bank that it would take to keep the operation going for an entire year. So we would be raising money for this year for next year's expenses. That's a pretty ambitious goal, but I also had one financial auditor who worked with a lot of nonprofits told me that his advice for his clients was that they had 3 years worth of money on hand at the end of the fiscal year. That's a pretty ambitious target, and I'm not sure that many nonprofits can achieve that. It's up to a board of directors to determine how funds should be invested. If 100% of your funds are invested in some sort of a long-term instrument, you won't have the cash on hand should an emergency arise. I could also tell you this, in all the years that I worked with grant-making foundations, not a single one was critical of our organization because we had a fund balance. On the other hand, I can tell you that a colleague told me once of a nonprofit that did not receive a grant from a pretty significant foundation because that foundation felt that the organization was in a precarious position because they did not have enough cash on hand. So while some people may struggle with the idea of a cash reserve or a fund balance for a nonprofit organization, I think that most leaders of organizations appreciate having the financial flexibility. That's today's Leadership Plus. I'm Dave Edwards. Leave a comment below, subscribe if you would, And if you'd like more information about leadership, management, and nonprofit issues, check out my website's blog at daveedwardsmedia.com.